the end of the day, I have done the two things that I said I would do. I have changed the way that traits are assigned to stations, technologies are assigned to stations, so that important ones can be given to the closest station of that faction to your territory. Actually, it's just your home station at the moment, which I think is okay. And then the other thing was, once you do liberate a station, I needed to improve the way trade routes are formed. It used to just always connect the last station you liberated to the new station you liberated to make a long line of trade routes, which doesn't look very good, and also could like massively go through other territories and stuff. I've now changed it so that it connects to all liberated stations within range, so you kind of form your own network and it makes all the trade routes it can. That looks really nice. Some problems though. There's basically, this comes up a lot, is like, you sometimes have to make something to figure out why the idea doesn't work, and this idea, something's got to change about it. The two problems I'm hitting are, one, even if we do guarantee that that a certain technology is assigned to the closest possible station of that faction to your territory, that does not ensure that it's within a reasonable range for you to be able to liberate it. Right now, a liberation range is quite generous. It's like twice as big as the range at which stations usually can connect to each other. But it's quite possible that all of the off-world stations are just on the other side of the galaxy. They're just absolutely miles away. I've already changed it so that your home station tries to be as close as possible to every territory, like it's at the midpoint of all the different territories. But it doesn't guarantee that there's any. I can't guarantee that the furthest station will be within some set minimum distance. And so the upshot of that is that for any given technology, I can't ensure that it's close enough to you that it will be quick to liberate it. So, possible solutions to that might be, make sure any technologies that are important just start already unlocked, or change the unlock system so that you don't have to unlock them to be able to find them, you only have to unlock them to be able to buy them from shops, and that might be enough. Or other options. And so problem number 2 is that if I let you liberate when it's time to liberate a station, if the options I give you are all of the stations within this generous range, you get a lot of stations, but it's still possible that they'll all be of one faction. If you are on the edge of, or you're just in the middle of off-world territory, and off-world territory is not right next to other territories, there's like a gap of empty space between them, that range might only cover off-world stations, and then you've only got off-world options. And in fact, it may even be possible that some groups of stations are so isolated from the rest of the galaxy that you would never be able to get to them. Like, their station range would never be big enough to cross that gap. I can make it bigger very easily, but at that point I'm giving you so many options it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, oh really, every single station in this huge radius all want to be liberated, and there happens to be a single person at each one of them that can do that. That'll feel a bit weird. The reason that the options I generate for you are so obey such a simple, consistent rule that was just all stations within a certain distance, is that I want the player to be able to plan ahead, and so they need to know right away how liberations work, or as soon as possible. They need to understand, oh, it's all the stations within a range, so if I liberate this one, that gets me closer to liberating that one. If you don't know that rule, or if that rule isn't in there, then even when you see a station that you want to liberate and you know you want to work towards it, you might not know how. You might not know that liberating this one will help you get to that one. You might just look at your options as the only options you're ever going to get. So, those two problems are so closely connected that it feels like I'm going to solve them both at once. And I'm not quite sure how yet. But that, as I'm talking through that problem, that one sounds like either I need to ensure that clusters of stations are closer together, like that no station can be X distance away from its closest neighbour of a different faction, or I need to change the liberation mechanic so that it's not distance dependent. It used to be that it was the closest station of each faction, and I changed that because that means you only have one option for each faction, and so you can't work within a faction's territory. You'd always just be forced to liberate the one that I've picked for you. So you're making fewer interesting decisions about how you navigate through their space and which bits of their territory you want to take. So I want to give you a couple of options, but I want to make sure you can always get to any station. I can change the galaxy generator. I can make things closer together. I can try and avoid those gaps. I don't really want to, or I don't want to change the way it spawns nebulae and fills them with stations. That works really well. It went through loads of iterations, and it used to like frequently generate ugly galaxies, but sometimes generate great ones. And I don't know quite what I did, but one day I was making some tweaks to it, and suddenly they're all beautiful. It's just always beautiful. And so I really feel like I've struck gold there. I don't want to fuck with it too much. As for like which stations belong to which faction, that code is pretty rough, and I would be happy to change that. So I could do something like, when we've placed all the stations but we haven't assigned factions yet, we pick a home station first, the first liberated one, and then we intentionally place all of the factions' territories so that they're quite close to you. But I'm getting a sense that I'm working too hard to get around a limitation, to get around a problem I've created for myself. The problem I've created for myself is I've locked off a technology that I think is actually important to the game, and now I'm trying to solve that by ensuring the player always has a short route to unlocking it. So really, maybe, what is it? What are the ones that I feel like the player can't do without? I feel like silence weapons they don't feel like something you need access to right away, but it would just suck if you didn't get them for hours. It would be a whole load of like stealth options. It would mean you don't use guns basically, because melee weapons are quieter, and so you do kind of need access to silence weapons. I think the start of the solution to this is, let's not make it so that you have to liberate a particular station in order to get access to silence weapons. And I don't know what form that solution takes. It could be just that we change what unlocking means and you can still find silence weapons. I think that might be alright. The problem with finding stuff is it's not intentional. You can't set out to find a silence pistol. You can keep looking until you do find one, but we don't know how long that'll take you. Whereas shops are nice because you get to decide what kind of character you're going to be. You're going to say, I'm going to spend this 500 that I start with, I'm going to spend it on this because this is the kind of person I want to be, and I like that kind of stuff. So I could change completely what unlocking means. Maybe unlocking doesn't even, maybe you can even buy silence weapons right from the start, but to unlock them, that means that you'll always have one in the shop. That doesn't seem super interesting. I don't want it to be a small thing. I want it to be a big deal to unlock something. The other thing, something else that occurred to me was like, what if I didn't attach technologies to individual stations, and it was just a case of when you capture a off-world station, you get a certain amount of off-world technology, like it's a sort of off-world juice, and then once you've got like 10 off-world juice, you can spend it to unlock a technology that belongs to off-world, which would mostly be non-lethal stuff, so concussion grenades or non-lethal guns when I do those. I feel like mechanically that's pretty good, because then you can get silence weapons as early as you want them, and it becomes player choice driven. Two problems with it. One is that it's very abstract, it's very gamey. It's like, I've made up some weird juice and you've got to collect the juice to spend it on some stuff. I'm not totally averse to that. Something Heat Signature doesn't have that I do enjoy in games is spending points on things. Like, you've got a skill point, buy a new skill. I don't have anything like that. This might feel a bit like that, but it feels like a bit of a stretch to explain it to the player. I don't know. When you capture them, you don't have to worry about it until you're liberating stations, and then when that choice is the one you're making, that's when I tell you, hey, capturing this will get you this close to unlocking an off-world technology, and here's the list of what those are. It would be a bit of work to present that, but that's doable. The other problem with it is that because it's... maybe this isn't a problem, but the thought that occurred is that makes it up to the player what they unlock pretty much. And when you make something dependent on player choice completely, and not on random stuff, that means that each galaxy would be kind of the same, because you could always basically do the same thing. But that might not be a problem for several reasons. One is that a galaxy is a long-term thing. I expect you to spend 10 to 20 hours in a galaxy. That might be all the time you ever spend with a game. You might never start a second one. I almost see a galaxy as like a playthrough. I don't want you to actually feel like you need to finish the galaxy, but I expect the length of time you spend in it to be about the length of time someone spends with a game that they play through once. So it wouldn't be a disaster if starting a new galaxy that looks really different and has a different layout wasn't a radically different experience from the unlocking technology point of view. That's not really an issue, is it? And then the other thing is, like, actually, you would still spawn closer to one person's territory than another person's territory, so it might be a case of yeah, you'll still unlock the off-world technologies in the same order, but you might not get to the off-world territories for a little while. So that might not be a bad system. There's something I like about the current thing of placing technologies at specific stations, though. You look at that map and you see them out there, and it's just kind of exciting to see, oh, if I get over there, I get super shotguns. I don't know what those are yet, but that could be awesome. I like that. And it works for nearly everything. Is it only silenced weapons? Concussion grenades was the other one that I thought was pretty important. And you need some kind of electronic countermeasure. So if enemies have shields, you need some way past the shields. And so Frazzlers and Jackers are the two main ways of doing that. And so if all those things are locked off, then I need to ensure that one of them is close. Maybe I could make silenced weapons and Frazzlers already unlocked at the start, and that solves most of these problems. My concern is that those are both pretty powerful things, and if you've got them, then a whole load of threats. I'd like a time when, I'd like to introduce the problem and then offer you the solution. So you start to encounter people with shields, and you're just like, shit, I don't know how to deal with that. I've got nothing that can deal with that. And then you're on the liberation stage, and you're like, oh, but that thing over there could help me with that. That sounds kind of appealing. And then, because what I'll do is I won't spawn you a ship full of shielded enemies if you haven't unlocked any technologies that can deal with them at all. I won't make a thing that's just totally impossible. It will be more like the odd rare enemy has them, and then only once you're kind of deep into the territory where you've got access to things that can take them out, that's when I might say, everyone on the ship has one, so you're not just going to need a Frazzler, you're going to need a whole bunch of them, or some more reliable way of taking out shields. Yeah, so that's not out of the question. I could just have silenced weapons and concussion grenades already not concussion grenades, some kind of electronic countermeasure already unlocked. And then I can always have better countermeasures. I can always have, like, the thing you start unlocked with is like a thing you have to run up to someone point blank and, like, tase them to disable their shield. And later on you get ones that, like, clear a whole room full of shields. Or like a sort of catastrophic, like, EMP bomb that just shuts down all shields on the ship or something. So that's not a problem. Silenced weapons, you're never going to have, like, a better version of that. It's always just going to be like they're silenced or they're not. So if I give you that right off the bat, it does feel like I'm losing something. But not if... yeah, it does. So there's the juice solution. There's the start with those two things unlocked solution. And then these are all solving the time to silenced weapon problem, like making those things available to the player early enough. The can I ever access this other faction's territory problem? That's different. And solutions to that mean... So, if I just extend the liberation range so you can get that far, and I somehow solve the problem of giving you too many options and making it look weird, then what would it look like when you did capture them? Would you form a trade route across that huge gap? Like, we're talking about a cluster of stations up here that's totally isolated from the rest of the galaxy, and right now you can't get to them. If I made it so that you get the option of liberating this one, then when you do we form a trade route across that gap? That would look alright, I think. Like, it would be a longer than usual trade route, but it doesn't cross anything necessarily, so that might look alright, and it'd be nice to have, like, then you've got a foothold in that territory. Another thought is that maybe liberating stations is just not so spatially based. It's just we pick like 5 and we don't tell you clearly how we pick them. That inhibits your ability to work towards one that you really want to unlock. Hey, but if we did the juice solution, where you just get technology credit and then pay to unlock things, then you don't need to work towards specific stations. You can just unlock any station of that faction, and that gets you closer to your goal. So those two go hand in hand quite well, but you do lose that sense of, like, having a technology out there that you want to work towards. I mean, you get it, but it's tucked away in a tech tree that you spend points to progress through rather than mapped out to the galaxy, which is something really neat about that. I love the idea of the galaxy being a tech tree in itself. I'm leaning towards the idea that everything you unlock is a nice, interesting, exotic bonus, because then I can just distribute them totally randomly, and every galaxy will be really different, and they would feel kind of exotic and cool. And maybe like just giving you silenced weapons right away is just an option. So then I've still got to solve how do you bridge the gap to isolated clusters, and I could, this sounds kind of dumb, but I could go through the galaxy at creation time and find what is the biggest distance for every station. Find the closest station that is, no. Basically, I'm trying to think, is there a way I can ensure that the liberation range is always big enough to reach that cluster? Whatever that gap is, figure out what that gap is, and then set that liberation range to be that big. I'm sure that's something I can write an algorithm for. I don't know what the algorithm is yet, but that's doable. My reservation about that is, what if that gap is just huge, and then your liberation range is always huge? It's more like, if you've got the closest station that isn't part of that cluster, I want to give you the option to get to that cluster. But how do I program that? It's kind of like if we just knew, if it was the closest station, the closest station of every faction. The problem with that in general is that it creates these crisscrossing trade routes. And if we don't create a trade route, we can do that, but then it makes it less clear what your territory looks like. So it could be all the stations that are within a certain range of you, which is what we've got at the moment. I'd make that range a bit smaller. And the closest station of each faction. And so all the stations that are close to you already, all the factions that do have a station close to you already, they're already catered for. But then any that don't have a station near to you, you always have the option of one of those. That feels kind of contrived. I don't know what it would look like. Probably wouldn't look too weird. I think it would be clear enough to the player that, hey, if I had a station closer to this other one, I could get access to it. It would let you jump huge distances. Like, if Offworld's territory is all the way across the galaxy, and I always make Offworld's closest station available to you as a liberation option, being able to jump all the way over there is not too weird, I suppose. You're not physically moving there. There's the other thought I'm having is that there's something about, like, if I could keep it spatially related, but not make it so strict. So instead of showing you a menu where we automatically unlock or enable liberations on all stations within a certain radius, instead we ask that you fly to one to liberate it. That, I don't love that, because it's a fairly important thing fictionally that you be someone who lives at that station, so that you are liberating your own station. You're not an outsider coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to help you guys by throwing off your shackles. Much prefer the idea of you coming from there. So, but yeah, there's something in my head. I like the idea of having to physically travel there in order to get it as an option. Is there something there? Could you have a sort of prep phase before the liberation options where you sort of fly around and decide which stations you want and you kind of tag them in some way? I don't know, this sounds weird, but maybe there's something there. Okay, so I'm gonna write this down probably, and then just take a break, do other things, and leave that running in the background. The fact that I've hit design problems is slightly unfortunate, because these were the last two items on a very long to-do list, so I was really geared up to be like done today. And I think I'm just going to say I am done. Like, it hasn't worked out perfectly, but I don't feel like discouraged by that. These feel like very solvable problems, and I had to build these systems to find out what those problems were, and therefore find out what the solutions were, and whatever the solutions were, they'll be really cool systems, and fun to play with. And so it does feel like progress, and I'm just going to mentally say, like, yes, I achieved my big milestone today, and that stuff is done. I have a new item on my to-do list in the future, which is to figure out these problems, but I'm not going to worry about that just yet.